We're going to start this puppy up. Clear? Prop.
And welcome back to Tip of the Week. One aircraft model we should be really familiar with, if we call ourselves builders, is the wonderful Pietenpol air camper. This aircraft was created back in the 1920s and is still a very popular aircraft to build and fly today. This was the 90th anniversary of that aircraft and was honored at AirVenture this year. That's a long history for any aircraft design, and you can build and fly one today. Let's take a listen to a couple of experts in this matter.
My name is Dan Helsper. I've been an EAA member for quite some time. When I was 16 years old, I was taking flying lessons at DuPage County Airport in Illinois. I was flying a Grumman American Yankee. And during that time in history, there were many airplanes that were parked in rows outside of the airports. And after a flight lesson one day, I was leaving the airport and I was going by row after row after row of Cherokees and whatnot, and out of the corner of my eye I saw one of the most beautiful sights I had ever seen in my entire life. I came to a screeching halt, parked the car, walked down the row, and as I approached I saw this absolutely gorgeous parasol wing airplane that looked just like this. I had no idea what it was. I walked up to the airplane and I looked down inside the open cockpit at the data plate, and it said Pietenpol air camper. And I thought, this is the most gorgeous airplane I had ever laid my eyes on. And at that point in my life, I vowed that was the airplane that I was going to build someday. So fast forward many years later, life goes on, you get married, you have children. I always kept that goal in mind. So in the year 2000, I finally was in a spot where I had the time, the money, and the place to do it. And I went on just a tremendously enjoyable journey starting to build this airplane. It's basically all wood construction, covered by fabric, with a few metal struts and fittings to go along with it. Metal engine mount to hold the engine. When you begin building, you just start with a bunch of raw material from aircraft spruce material. You make yourself a rib jig, and you make each individual wooden rib all identical in this particular airplane. Then there's two spruce spars that go the entire length of this particular wing. This is a one-piece wing. It's 29 feet long. And I had plenty of building space in my workshop, so I could make it all one piece. Then when I finished the wing, I hung that up and began on the wooden fuselage, which is also made out of aircraft spruce material. It's essentially 1 inch by 1 inch longerons formed into a box structure with diagonals to strengthen it. It's all covered by fabric. The tail feathers are built the same way, spruce wood. It's covered with fabric. Now, different Pietenpol builders elect to use different engines and have different landing gear configurations. But my goal when I started this was to build this airplane as close to the original plans as possible. Now, you ask yourself, where did this design come from? Well, in 1929, there was a man that lived in Cherry Grove, Minnesota. His name was Bernard Pietenpol. And he didn't have a lot of money, and he experimented with his own design airplanes. And prior to this one, he built a few different designs, and they weren't real good performers. So each time that he was able to build and complete a model, he learned a great deal, and he built on his education each time. So finally in 1929, he came up with this design. It was a two-place airplane, and it was powered by a Model A Ford engine. Now, at that time in 1929, the Model A Fords came out, and Henry Ford ended up producing millions of that particular model. So consequently, there was millions of these engines available. And Bernard Pietenpol was a auto mechanic, and so he didn't have a lot of money, but he had access to different pieces and parts to the engine. So he was able to build an engine from parts, and he transformed the automobile engine for aircraft use, made different tweaks and changes and whatnot. So he placed the Model A Ford engine inside his Pietenpol airplane, and it turned out to be a complete success. He could put two people in the pits and still have enough power to fly it around. Now, there was a magazine published in Minneapolis called Modern Mechanics, and Mr. Pietenpol picked up one of these magazines, I believe in about 1932, and the editor of the magazine claimed that automobile engines were not practical for use in airplanes and they wouldn't work. Well, he proceeded to write a letter to the editor of the Modern Mechanics magazine explaining to him that indeed it's possible and it has been done. So the editor of the magazine invited him to fly his airplane to Minneapolis to show him. So Mr. Pietenpol and his neighbor, who also had an airplane at that time, both flew their airplanes over to Minneapolis to prove that in fact it could be done. So as a result of that, the editor of the magazine printed a lengthy article written by Bernard as to, the step-by-step how to build this airplane, 3-view drawings in there, and it created a much interest in the design, so much so that Bernard was able to produce plans and eventually different parts of the airplane to sell to potential builders. Now, when Bernard decided to do that, he didn't have any plans for it. He had completed airplanes, but he didn't have any plans. So he hired his neighbor, who I believe was 17 years old. His name was Orrin Hoopman. Was a high school student who was taking a drafting course. So he hired his 17-year-old neighbor to come over with his tape measure and measure every single part of the airplane and produce a set of hand-drawn plans. And those plans have survived to this day. And you can still buy these exact same plans from the Pietenpol family and build your own airplane. And there's quite a large following for this particular airplane.
Okay, hi, my name's Randy Bush from Lexington, Tennessee. This is a Pietenpol air camper that I built. A little different from what Dan Helsper's was with the Model A. This is Corvair powered. I started this plane in 1999 and finished it in 2007. Scratch built from plans. It's wood and fabric. It's got the Corvair engine on it. It's a William Wynn conversion. Used his manual. He sells all the parts and a good little engine. a little bit different air speeds and performance from the Model A guys. A really smooth engine. As far as the building of the plane, if you can build a big Model A or a big model airplane, you could build one of these. It's a lot of fun, just glue, fabric, and wood. Just a fun experience all in all. A lot of people don't realize that planes are actually made of wood and fabric, so it's kind of fascinating to people. I get that all the time of, you mean this thing is glued together? But yes, the way it was done for years and years. This little plane cruises about 80 mile an hour, good climb, and like I said, really smooth operating. I really like the Corvairs, and I think anybody else would too. So this is Bernard Pietenpol actually was the first person that flew with the Corvair. He started out with the Model A's in the 20s and the 30s because that's what was available. And then in the 60s when the Corvair came out, he liked the idea of a direct drive air-cooled engine, and he tried one, if I'm not mistaken, on a I can't remember what plane he put it in, but he tested that, and then he put one on the Pietenpol, and that's what he built later from then on, other than the Model A's, because it's more available, more power, a smooth power plant. Also, the fabric covering is a Dacron fabric. You put it on, just like I said, like a big model airplane. You glue it on and you heat shrink it down. It tightens up. The paint on this is a Stewart Systems. It's a waterborne polyurethane, so there's no harmful chemicals or anything that you have to breathe. So it turns out a pretty good finish. This finish is 12 years old and still looks pretty good. A few dents and dings. Like I said, I fly the airplane. I've got right at 780 hours on it, so it doesn't sit in the hangar. It gets flown and used. So I think it still looks pretty good for 12 years old. And like I said, I fly this thing. It's about 600 air miles from my house in Tennessee up here. It's a long, slow flight, but that's what you build a Pietenpol for, is to enjoy the flying. So you don't need to get in any hurry to get here. Just enjoy the flight. That's what it's all about. Low and slow. Breeze in your hair, smell the grass cuts, and all that kind of good stuff. So if you're interested in a wooden fabric plane, they're fairly inexpensive to build comparably to kits and things. So you just take your time, work on it a little bit here and there. Like I said, I got 7 years, but that's mostly weekends and every once in a while through the week if I got a time off to do it. So roughly, I guess I've probably got over 7 years, maybe 15, 20,000, well, probably close to 20 grand in it. But you compare that to a fishing boat or any other kind of hobby, it's comparable. Don't know in today's money exactly what you could build one for, but not much more than that, I wouldn't think.
There's thousands and thousands of this particular model that have been built over the years since 1929. Now, every summer at Brodhead, Wisconsin, the weekend before the week of Oshkosh, is the Brodhead Pietenpol fly-in. And that's the annual Pietenpol gathering where anybody who has completed one of these airplanes, if they possibly can, it's the mecca of the Pietenpol fly-in. And if you would like to learn about this design, that's the place to go. It's a very nice fly-in. It's very laid back. There's no charge. You just show up. But everybody hangs around their airplane, and you can ask any particular question that you'd like to find out any detail about it. I have flown this airplane up here from Puryear, Tennessee. This is my third time. The first year I flew it up here, I won a workmanship award. And so the next year I flew it up here, they asked me, when I registered it, they asked me, well, do you want to get it judged? And I said, well, no, I've already won the award. And every time the judges would come by, they said, you need to get this judged. You need to get this judged. I said, well, okay. So I got a Judge Me sticker and I put it on there. And I was very fortunate to win a Bronze Lindy Award from that year. But I'm very proud of that. If anyone is contemplating building an airplane and you want a little bit more of a challenge than a kit where you have two aligned holes and you match part A with part B that are already made with the holes drilled and you just put a rivet in them, that's not me. I could never build an airplane like that. If there's any potential builders out there that want a little bit more of a challenge to use their head to interpret the drawings and to fill in the blanks themselves to make an airworthy airplane, I would highly recommend this Pietenpol design. And the way you would get started is to purchase the plans from the Pietenpol family. It's still available for sale from the Bernard Pietenpol's grandson. But I guarantee you that the journey of building an airplane like this, which took me 10 years, was the most enjoyable thing I've ever done in my entire life. And the best part of the whole thing is the camaraderie that you gain from being part of the Pietenpol community. My best friends are the guys that I've come to know that have built this similar airplane. And as I attend the Broadhead Pietenpol reunion every summer, it's like just going home. So I would highly recommend this particular design if you're thinking about building an airplane.
And there you have it. Now you know a little more about this wonderful aircraft design and a couple of the builders that are responsible for keeping it alive and flying. For more information from builders directly, visit flycorvair.net, as there is an extensive blog where builders have recorded their complete building activities with lots of technical information. There is quite the connection between the Pietenpol aircraft movement today and the Fly Corvair engine company. Take a look. And enough of this. Please, everyone, back to building.